The night the news finally broke, the entire financial world seemed to hold its breath. Screens across living rooms, offices, and trading floors lit up with the same ticker headline: Breaking, new Iraqi Dinar rate announced on national television. For many, it was just another financial headline, one among thousands that come and go in the endless churn of global markets. But for a smaller, far more passionate group, dinar holders, dong investors, currency speculators who had waited years, even decades, this was the announcement that turned their patience into fireworks. Phones began to ring, online forums erupted in celebration, and for the first time in years, the dream of a revalued Iraqi dinar was no longer a whisper. It was being confirmed on television, right in front of millions of astonished viewers. The anchor's voice was steady but electrifying as the words rolled out. The Central Bank of Iraq has officially adjusted the exchange rate of the Iraqi dinar, raising its value significantly against the US dollar. The camera cut to images of jubilant Iraqis waving their national flag in Baghdad, while international finance reporters scrambled to interpret what this meant for the region, for global markets, and for ordinary people holding stacks of dinar halfway around the world. This was not a rumor, not a blog post, not a leaked memo. This was real, broadcast live, and suddenly, what had been dismissed by many as speculation, a dream, or even a scam, was undeniable reality, and that's where our story begins. For years, the Iraqi dinar had been the subject of relentless speculation. On one hand, skeptics mocked the idea that a war-torn currency, plagued by political instability and corruption, could ever rise in value. On the other, believers held on to their notes with unshakable conviction, convinced that Iraq's oil reserves, natural resources, and rebuilding efforts would one day restore the dinar to its former glory. The divide between dreamers and doubters was vast, and for years, it seemed like the doubters had the upper hand. But what most of the world never understood is that Iraq has always been more than the images of conflict shown on Western television. Beneath the headlines of war and politics lies a country sitting on the world's fifth-largest proven oil reserves. Oil isn't just money, it's influence, it's leverage, it's power. And as global energy markets shifted, as oil prices surged and demand rose from Asia to Europe, Iraq found itself in a position it hadn't been in for decades. A player with leverage. That leverage is what set the stage for the revaluation, what many in the financial underground simply call the RV. In the months leading up to the announcement, subtle signs were everywhere, though only the sharpest analysts picked up on them. The Central Bank of Iraq began quietly tightening its monetary policies, restricting black market exchanges, and stabilizing the gap between the official and parallel rates. Corruption crackdowns were announced. New trade agreements were signed. Meanwhile, whispers began circulating that international institutions, the IMF, the World Bank, and even certain Gulf states were quietly preparing for something big. Then came the most telling sign: the sudden acceleration of Iraq's currency reform project. Parliamentary sessions, once bogged down in endless delays, began moving faster. Proposals that had sat idle for years suddenly gained traction. And in local markets, there were reports of dinar scarcity as the government pulled older notes out of circulation. For anyone watching closely, it was clear something monumental was brewing. And then, on that fateful night, the confirmation arrived, broadcast live, undeniable. The anchor's voice declared that the new exchange rate placed the dinar at a value the world hadn't seen since before the Gulf War. For ordinary Iraqis, this meant purchasing power. Imported goods would suddenly be cheaper. Wages would stretch further, and the long nightmare of inflation and devaluation was easing. For international speculators, it meant an extraordinary windfall. Imagine buying stacks of currency at fractions of a penny and suddenly seeing them worth multiples overnight. It was the kind of story that could turn small investments into life-changing fortunes. Celebrations erupted across social media. Videos of people holding their dinar notes went viral. In the United States, Europe, and even parts of Asia, small investor groups who had quietly believed for years suddenly found themselves vindicated. Some cried, Some screamed. Some prayed. Others rushed to calculators and spreadsheets, tallying just how much their patience had turned into profit. But the dinar wasn't alone in the spotlight. Hot on its heels came speculation about the Vietnamese Dong, another currency long whispered about in the same speculative circles. If Iraq could pull this off, could Vietnam be next? The parallels were striking. Another resource-rich nation, another undervalued currency, another story of recovery waiting to be told. And so, as dinar holders celebrated, dong holders found themselves in a fever pitch of hope. To truly understand why this RV shook the financial world, you have to rewind the clock. The Iraqi dinar wasn't always a penny currency. Before decades of conflict, sanctions, and upheaval, the dinar was one of the most valuable currencies in the Middle East, with a reputation for strength. Older generations still remember when the dinar could command $3 or more. But war has a way of eroding value, not just in human lives, but in economies. Sanctions crippled trade. Corruption hollowed out institutions. Inflation eroded savings. And what was once a proud currency was reduced to near worthlessness on the international stage. Yet currencies are not static. They're reflections of nations, economies, and political will. And Iraq's story didn't end with collapse. Its oil exports grew. Its political system, though fragile, showed signs of progress. Regional alliances shifted in its favor. And slowly but surely, the building blocks of recovery began to stack up. The only missing piece was the moment of recognition. The day the world would acknowledge that the dinar deserved a higher value, that day now had arrived.